Good afternoon, dear colleagues and guests. Let me declare open the session of the Dissertation Council for the defense of thesis Mahmutaj Noela for the degree of candidate of political sciences, political problems of international relations, global and regional development, on the theme the current situation and prospects of the Russian-Albanian relations. Here, let me call it technical break, because we are an external opponent is trying to get in touch with us, and we need to wait for him. Thank you.
Теперь совсем исчезло, правильно? А все замолчали. Хорошо. Видать, потому что я почти не играю в компьютер, я еще не вижу этих значков.
Да. Здравствуйте.
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 Да. Ну, надеюсь, что на этот раз будет работать. Да.
Мы вас видим, мы вас слышим. Слышите ли вы нас? Видите ли вы нас?
Да, я слышу вас.
Все. Тогда, соответственно, мы начинаем с вами.
Then let us start by the order St. Petersburg University of the 25th of June 2020, number 5913/1. Me, Yeromina Natalia Valerina, Doctor of Political Science, Professor of the Department of European Studies of St. Petersburg University, was appointed Chairman of this Dissertation Council. Other members of the Dissertation Council were appointed with the same order. Let me introduce them to you. Lagutina Maria Lvovna, Doctor of Political Science, Professor of the World Politics Department, St. Petersburg University. Baranov Nikolai Alexeyevich, Doctor of Political Science, Professor of the Department of Political Institutions and Applied Political Studies, St. Petersburg University. In the remote access mode, we have Lebedeva Marina Mikhailovna, Doctor of Political Science, Head of the Department of World Political Processes, Moscow State Institute of International Relations, University, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. Maria Mikhailovna, can you see and hear us? Yes, I can see and hear you. Thank you. Also, in remote access mode, we have Anton Ales Bibler, PhD, Professor of Ljubljana University, Slovenia. Can you see? Can you hear us? Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. Also, the degree applicant, Mahmutaj Noela, is present. Also in touch with us is the academic advisor of the applicant, Fudalay Konstantin Konstantinovich, Doctor of History, Professor of European Studies Department of St. Petersburg University. Konstantin Konstantinovich, can you see, can you hear us? Yes, I can see and hear you. Thank you. That's perfect. So all the members of the Dissertation Council and the applicant are present. We can all see and hear each other, so we can start. To improve the quality of our communication, please, dear colleagues, when not speaking, turn off your microphones, but don't forget to turn them on when you're given the floor. Let me also inform you that our meeting is being recorded and broadcast online at St. Petersburg University website, and the speeches are being simultaneously translated from Russian into English or from English into Russian. At the live broadcast of the Dissertation Council session, an email address is currently posted to which all the listeners can send their opinions and questions to the degree applicant online regarding her thesis and the current scientific discussion of her speech. These questions shall be forwarded to me by the Technical Support Department, and I shall voice them during the discussion. Questions should be related to the applicant's speech and the content of her thesis, and it's obligatory to indicate the name, position, and the place of employment of the author of the question. Questions that are not related to the scientific discussion, to the discussion of the thesis and evaluation of the thesis shall not be voiced. In accordance with the order of awarding the degree of Candidate of Science and Doctor of Science at St. Petersburg University, approved by the local regulations of St. Petersburg University, hereinafter referred to as the order, a session of the Dissertation Council is considered competent if at least 2/3 of the approved composition of the Dissertation Council, but not less than 4 persons, take part in its work. Our Dissertation Council consists of 5 persons. All 5 members are present, including 2 members of the Council in the remote interactive mode. All the members of the Dissertation Council and the applicant have audio-visual contact. Thus, there is a I entrust the curator of the defense as honorary officer of the Dissertation Council Activity Support Department to draw up the attendance list in which the Dissertation Council members shall be recorded and to indicate their work mode. Let me set forth the procedure of today's session with the approximate duration of 2 hours. Chairman's summary report on the main content of the documents submitted by the degree applicant and their compliance with the regulations. Answers to possible questions, approximately 5 minutes. Brief presentation by the degree applicant outlining the key points of her study, approximately 15 minutes. Questions to the applicant strictly on her report, no more than 2 minutes per question. Answers of the members of the Decision Council with their reviews, their opinions, questions and suggestions to the degree applicant, no more than 10 minutes for each speaker. Speech of the chairman and her review, approximately 10 minutes. Answers of the applicant to questions and remarks made by members of the Dissertation Council, no more than 20 minutes. Open discussion speeches at the request of those present at the defense with the summary of their positions and specific questions, proposals to the author, strictly on the topic of her study, no more than 2 minutes for each speaker. At that, all the interested persons are kindly requested to register in the registration sheet and fully introduce themselves before speaking. Next, presentation by the chairman of questions which came in the course of discussion and sent during the broadcast. We shall hear answers of the degree applicant, no more than 2 minutes. That shall be followed by a speech of the academic advisor, no more than 3 minutes. That shall be followed by the discussion by members of the Decision Council before open voting, approximately 5 minutes. For that period, broadcast sound shall be switched off. That shall be followed by the open individual voting. Chairman of the Dissertation Council shall count the votes and results shall be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. A decision on awarding or not awarding the academic degree shall be made. Then the floor shall be given to the degree applicant. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions to this procedure or objections? There are no questions and objections. Let's start running the procedure. Please remember to switch off your mobile phones. Thank you for your understanding. Let us start. Summary report. This is by Mahmutaj Noela for the degree of candidate of Political Science, Specialty 230004, Political Problems of International Relations, Global and Regional Development, on the theme Current Situation Prospects of the Russian-Albanian Relations. Was accepted for defense by the order of the Academic Secretary submitted on the 25th of June 2020, number 5912/1. Mahmutaj Noela wrote her thesis at St. Petersburg University. The academic advisor of Mahmutaj Noela is Doctor of History, Professor of the European Studies Department of Kudalay Konstantin Konstantinovich. The number of publications of the applicant, which set out the main scientific results of her thesis, according to the list enclosed, is 8. In journals from the list approved by the Ministry of Education, 3 publications. In journals indexed in the scientometric databases, Web of Science and Scopus, 1 publication. The applicant has submitted to the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University a full package of documents for acceptance for consideration and defense of the thesis. All documents respond to Article 12, Section 3 of the order. All the documents submitted by the applicant according to the information received from the curator comply with the requirements and are kept in the applicant's attestation file. Copies are available from the Office of the Dissertation Council Activity Support Department, who's present at the session. Before I give the floor to the applicant, do you, dear members of the Dissertation Council, have any general questions? Is there a need to present all the documents submitted? See, there are no questions, so let us give the floor to the degree applicant for her brief presentation. Please remember, you have exactly 15 minutes. Noela, you have the floor. Thank you. Dear Chairman, dear members of the Dissertation Council, dear colleagues and listeners, let me present to your attention this is current state and prospects of the Russian-Albanian relations. The overall tendency is the object of close attention of Morrison, including social sciences, international integration processes are affecting an increasing number of states, including post-communist countries, for which one of the main objectives today is to find options for new interaction in the political, economic and humanitarian spheres. The object of my study is the relations between Russia and Albania at the current period. During the current period, the subject of the study is the content and dynamics of development of the Russian-Albanian relations under the changing geopolitical realities. The aim of my work is to present the interstate relations of the Russian Federation and the Republic of Albania as independent actors in international relations, as well as to describe difficulties that hinder their positive development related to the conditions of the modern international system development. The objective is achieved by means of the following research tasks. Analyze the concept of great power interaction with a small state. To identify the historical conditions and factors of development of relations between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Albania. To evaluate consequences of the fall of the communist regime on the political relations between the states. To demonstrate the main directions of cooperation between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Albania. To identify specific features, main challenges and trends in the development of bilateral relations in the modern world. Present ways of possible development of relations in the future. Degree of scientific investigation of the problem. To date, relatively few scientific papers and articles have been devoted to this issue, since the Russian-Albanian relations are not particularly developed or active in their current state. Note works devoted to the historical analysis of the relationship between the two states, joint participation in the significant historical, as well as works that examine the close relations between the two states during the communist regime. Among them are the works of Kudolay, Smirnov, Arsh, Volkov, Lemrasha, etc., which examine in detail the history of interaction between Albania and the USSR. Authors Drunechkina, Lemrasha, Kakumani, Nikitin, Kurbatsky, Hoti state the positive dynamics of the Russian-Albanian relations in the sphere of economy in the 21st century indicate the possibility and prospects of investing in the Albanian energy, resource and infrastructure industries, as well as in the humanitarian sphere and tourist industry. Other authors and researchers, such as Albanian scientists Pascal Mila, Shaban Murati, Islam Lauka, Recep Kush, and Russian researchers Guskova, Entina, etc., note the different attitude of the parties to Kosovo issue prevent Russia and Albania from cooperating more closely in the political and economic spheres. Also, a view on various aspects of the present and future of Albania and the Albanian people in relations with Russia is presented in the collection of articles edited by Kuleshov, Nikitin, as well as Iskanderov, which consider the history of Albania in the Balkan context. Authors specialize in the Balkan issue and history of Albania, such as Miranda, Viscas, James Pettifer, Fred Abrahams, etc., consider the historical and political issues of the Balkan region, as well as pay great attention to the foreign policy of Albania. It also seems logical to us to analyze the relations between Russia and Albania within the framework of the concept of relations between large and small states. Such a concept is formulated in the works of Morgenthau, Waltz, Kennedy, Black, Miller, Kehine, Nye, which introduced the great power and small state, as well as outline the basic principles of such interaction. Sources on this topic are official documents, the Protocol on Normalization of Relations, Treaty on Friendship and Cooperation with the Russian Federation and the Republic of Albania, as well as texts of the concept of Russia's foreign policy and other legislative and regulatory documents and acts of public authorities of the two states regulating the interaction in the field of economy, tourism, and humanitarian sphere to which the content analysis was applied. Scientific work uses a comparative political method to study the development of relations between Albania and Russia. A significant part of the basis of this work is the texts of public speeches on foreign policy issues and the recent development of relations between Russia and Albania. Materials from official websites, including those of the Foreign Ministry, Russian Federation, Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Economic Development, as well as Albanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the government of the Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Finance and Economy of Albania, that contain full archive of speeches, diplomats. The This material because in this case the probability of obtaining reliable empirical data increases, which in turn contributes to obtaining reasonable conclusions. To analyze dynamics of the economic relations between Moscow and Tirana, statistical data of the General Directorate of Statistics of the Republic of Albania, INSTAT, and customs statistics of the Russian Federation were used. The relations between Russia and Albania were studied in all spheres of interaction, which is a systematic and interdisciplinary approach. The main points are as follows. First, an important role in the international relations is played by the interaction of great power with small states, which is reflected in the significant impact of this interaction on the foreign policy, practice, vectors of global politics, and regional relations. Second, in the current phase of interstate relations, Russia and Albania adhere to the principles of bilateral cooperation expressed in respect for sovereignty of the partner, principles of justice, non-aggression, and others, which correspond to the modern rules of conduct in the international political arena. Third, the new phase of relations between Russia and the Republic of Albania spans 30 years and shows a significant potential for partnership cooperation. At the moment, cooperation between Russia and Albania in most aspects is formal and shows some positive dynamics only in those areas that are far from influence of political vectors as possible. 5. Analysis of cooperation between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Albania suggests that a third force, such as presence of the third force, such as European Union, USA, and NATO. And finally, in line with the general principles of building the interstate relations, namely trust-based partnership and equal respect for the parties, it's necessary to optimize the relations between the countries in such a way as to level out the influence of existing controversial aspects on effective cooperation and to resolve the problematic issues. As a result of this study, the following conclusions were drawn. Albania plays a strategic role in the region because of its location, with access to Adriatic and Ionian seas and a large number of resources, which make it attractive to other countries. Therefore, if we consider the interaction of great powers with small states, we also talk about the relations between Russia as a great power and Albania as a small state. The new world system will always be unstable due to the uneven economic growth, which creates new rules of the game on the world arena and the new rules of cooperation. Therefore, the relations between the states will develop to the extent that the new world order trend will allow them. The modern international relations are developing rapidly and in many ways resulting in the new controversial issues and contradictions. In our case, the key factors complicating the interstate interaction are subjective and objective reasons, the root of which lies in the general political world. During the long historical the Balkan region has been declared a sphere of interest for Russia, but the political processes in the region and the global development of the international relations made some adjustments, making the situation ambiguous and complicating the interaction between Russia and Albania. Such processes include the history of the ethno-cultural community of the Balkan peoples, military actions in the region, establishment and disintegration of the communist regime, growth of the national consciousness and establishing a national identity, creation of the new principles of the foreign policy within a democratic system, etc. When analyzing the political relations between Russia and Albania, we found that the historical factor plays a major role in foundation of the interaction. It's impossible not to take into account the long history of interaction between the states when assessing the current state of their relations. It's important to remember that also in the case of forecasting the possible developments. Also, when analyzing the political course of the states and the position of Russia and Albania in the modern international arena, it's necessary to take into account geopolitical factors and their historical dynamics in the region. Here, we should mention the enlargement and the European Union, as well as the U.S. relations and role with European countries that have influenced the political position of countries toward relations with Russia. Of course, The enlargement and position will also be present in the Russian-Albanian politics because, as we have analyzed, relations depend on the international factors and are not directly related. These factors have a significant impact on the political relations and partnership between the states. It is also important to remember that there is a certain imbalance between the historical memory and historical realities. As of today, the relations between Russia and Albania are built in accordance with the principles of international law, where the state observes the rule of the international arena, including the principles of respect for sovereignty, justice, etc. In the 90s were a difficult period of formation of the new foreign domestic policy for the states. During the internal transformations, the countries took the initiative to create a possible model of cooperation, which resulted in the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation, drafted in 1995, which was a significant step in the flexible and rapid changes in the system of international cooperation. In today's political environment in Europe, the states have to review their political ties and to regulate them with the new methods to eventually create conditions for a productive dialogue in line with the global trends. Such tendencies have an impact on the political courses of countries and consequently on the sphere of bilateral diplomacy, on the creation of a legal framework. The economic, social, cultural and humanitarian ties are created anew or undergo major changes in the vector of influence in the system of political and legal norms. Nevertheless, even if the vector of foreign policy changes, Russia and Albania will cooperate in the economic sphere, which strengthens the relations between the states and inspires hope for further dialogue. The relations between the countries affect all the major areas, which means that the necessary optimization of the dialogue will bring obvious effects to the parties. Such optimization should be progressive and integrated into the developing relations, preventing slow progress that has occurred over the past 20 years from reversing. Also, a smooth rise will have less impact on the political sphere of interaction that will help to avoid new difficulties. For the success of this dialogue and long-term cooperation, however, it's necessary to solve a number of difficult issues facing partners as well as within the states. The laws of the economic relations and the rules of market existence are still undergoing changes due to the general processes which requires the development of new algorithms of interaction, including the Russian-Albanian relations. The systematic strengthening of cooperation should become the basis of a foreign policy of the states in regarding each other. The results shall be establishing friendly relations and mutually beneficial relations between Russia and Moscow and Tirana. Dear Chairman, dear Council members, my presentation is over. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Noela. Do Dissertation Council members have questions regarding Noela's presentation? Yes, I have a question. What, in your opinion, lies as a foundation the relations between Albania and the great state, political or pragmatic interests? And the second question in connection with this, is there in the political sphere in Albania any struggle or positioning of political forces according to adherence to certain states, pro-European, pro-American or pro-Russian trends, or is there a certain unity? Thank you very much for your question. Let me clarify what makes the basis of Albania's relation as a pragmatic or ideological basis, or some ideological foundations. Thank you once again. I believe that the relations of Albania with great states is more pragmatic, the cooperation and mutual interests. In our situation, Albania as is a relation with European Union, which means that for Albania this is beneficial. Interaction with European Union is more important than with other great states, because we understand that first is a support for the economy and addressing other issues such as internal and both internal and external. And about your second, and in the political field of Albania, are there any pro-American, pro-European, pro-Russian forces, or can we talk of unity inside the country? Thank you for your question. After the fall of the communist regime, Albania, as I have already mentioned, is NATO and European Union, which means that the political forces of Albania are oriented towards the West. So the two main political parties, both are oriented towards the West. Thank you. Do we have more questions? Welcome. I have another question regarding political parties and in the society. How do the people perceive Russia? I think you have touched upon this issue in your thesis. So what is the vision? What's the attitude to Russia in Albania? Thank you for your question. The Albanian society also is oriented towards integration with Europe, and most Albanian people are oriented towards the West, have Western-oriented opinions. Especially of late, everybody's trying to strengthen their relations with the European Union and the United States. Then I have another question, which I have asked in my review, which will be appropriate here. So can we talk about any prospects of cooperation between Russia and Albania in the political sphere if neither on the political nor on the civil society level there's no interest in this relationship? Thank you for this question. In the political aspect, in reality, between Russia and Albania, there's some stagnation because we have not signed the friendship agreement drafted in 1995. In year 2004, an attempt was made when Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Minister Lavrov, but the treaty was not ratified. And so this project is on still a draft. That is why we don't see any specific projects in the political sphere. But if we take a look at the economic sphere, humanitarian sphere, there are some good projects, especially in the humanitarian sphere, which at the modern stage are developing well, for science and education, and some joint projects and other projects which, as I have said, in the humanitarian spheres, culture and education, which are developing well. But after a treaty on friendship and cooperation is signed, I think we shall see some specific projects in the political sphere as well. When will this treaty be signed? Thank you. That's a very interesting question. I think that right now between Albania and Russia, there's not enough meetings at. So I think the treaty will be signed after a while, because when Prime Minister of Albania came to Moscow as the chairman of OBSE, they discussed this treaty as well, among other issues, and this discussion gave us hope that the treaty will be reviewed and maybe signed and take effect. I think there is hope because the next meeting is expected in the end of this year, where again all the ministers of foreign affairs will meet in Tirana, and they will discuss the Treaty on Friendship and Cooperation and other aspects which hinder the relations between Moscow and Tirana. Thank you. I also have a question. Now that Albania supported anti-Russian sanctions, as a factor, Albania cooperates with European states as an obvious factor. How will this, what impact will it have on long-term relationship in the economic sphere, in the political sphere? Because here we are talking under pragmatic circumstances that will be affected by those sanctions. Thank you for your question. I think that the sanctions will have a negative impact on the economic relations between the two states. As I have analyzed in my work, the economic potential between the two states is very big, especially for the Albanian economy. But as Albania is supporting pro-Western views, the policy here will always follow the policy of the European Union. That is why it depends on how the modern realities, and so we should watch the situation on the world arena, because every day something new happens and we always see new developments between the two states, and I think that Albania will follow the path of the European Union. Do we have more questions to the representative? Anton, welcome. Don't you think, Ms. Mahmutaj, that refusal of Albanian government to ratify the treaty is an external manifestation and not the reason for stagnation relations between the Republic of Albania and the Russian Federation? Thank you for your question, Professor Bebler. Am I right in understanding that refusal to ratify the treaty, Albania's refusal to ratify the Treaty on Friendship is an external manifestation, but in reality there's no such objective on Albania's agenda? I think that Albania, in reality, has not denied intention to sign the treaty, so the treaty still has draft status, and probably the state is not ready for it, because Albania today, unfortunately, is in unstable political state, and that, of course, the cooperation will be inefficient, not only with Russia, but with the Balkan states. That is why I think Albania is ready to ratify this treaty, but Albania just needs time for this. Thank you. Do we have more questions? See, there are no questions. Do we have any external reviews? We have no external reviews. So let's present reviews of the submitted by the members of the Dissertation Council. All members of the Dissertation Council shall be given the floor, since all our reviews are published at university website. Let's outline the key points of the review and the critical remarks. We shall hear all the reviews, and then our degree applicant shall answer all the questions and critical remarks. First, the floor shall be given to Lagutina Maria Lvovna. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, let me introduce my review to the thesis by Mahmutaj Noela, the current state and prospects of relations of Russian-Albanian relations. To me, the thesis is interesting, the relevance of which depends on processes that we are watching in the world and the geopolitical transformations and the changes and processes occurring in the region, in Eastern Europe. So all this was very interesting from the point of view of a citizen of Albania in the Russian Federation. Obviously, the current state of relations Russian-Albania is on a relatively low level, which results in insufficient investigation of this issue and lack of analytical material for the political elite of both states to find the new ways to develop the relationship. Nevertheless, it's obvious that the agenda of bilateral relations with not only that includes not only the bilateral relations, but regional and global issues and challenges such as the Kosovo issue, NATO expansion, situation in Ukraine, sanctions, etc. What I would like to say, what I liked about the thesis, what I'd like to focus on as the most valuable is chapter 3, where the author describes the results of the author's investigation and the three scenarios suggested by the author, the relationship between Russia and Albania. And generally it was very interesting to look at the Albanian perspective of the development of bilateral relations and the modern role of Russia in the world and in the region. This theme is very poorly covered in Russian national, domestic and international studies. And let me proceed to my critical remarks. I have a number of critical remarks. My first remark is about the aim of the study. This remark is fairly common. The aim of this work was to present the interstate relations of the Russian Federation and Republic of Albania as independent actors of international relations and to describe challenges preventing a positive development. First of all, aim should be one and not contain two aims, as is the case here. And secondly, when stating the aim, should know analytical work. So description is only a description. Same is true about the first task, to study the concept of interaction of a great state with a small state. What result can you achieve by studying? So you have studied something and that's it. Secondly, there's no doubt that the thesis shall fill in, as you said, a gap in the study of bilateral relations of Albania and Russia at the current state. Yet, in my opinion, why you were so on to describing novelty of your study? I think it should be described in more detail, including how your work contributes in bridging this gap. Three, in the theoretical methodological basis, you do not mention methods of the study, which surprised me because from the text of your thesis, it's obvious that you used the scenario method and you heard methods in your presentation. Why you did not list them in your study? The theoretical approach raises doubt. You put in the same line Morgenthau, Walton, Kehen, and 9. Then one gets a question: which theoretical approach is the foundation of your research? Next, in the text of your thesis, you talk about the potential, you talk a lot about the potential of developing the bilateral relations between Russia and Albania, for example, on page 28 of your thesis, and further in chapter 2. It's potential spheres for cooperation. You mentioned the energy sector, tourism, cultural cooperation. But there are too many general phrases around this. So which projects are already there in the text? You mentioned some Russian companies, but it will be interesting for me, much more interesting for me, to learn which Albanian companies are already able to enter the Russian market or have already entered the Russian market. Unfortunately, I have not found this in the text, and I haven't heard this information in your presentation. Next. An obvious advantage of the study, as has already been mentioned, is the author's scenario of development of Russia and Albania in the future, yet you never defined which scenario is most likely and why. So that is a very interesting question, your opinion. And from your scenarios, which of your scenarios is more probable? And finally, the list is a technical. In the list of sources in literature, you mentioned websites of various agencies and information agencies on page 109, yet websites, according to the rules, not sources, but materials published there. So, but what I was interested in is fiction. Which of these which materials have you used, and which works of fiction? This is something new in a thesis. This is fiction. Yet, let me say again that the overall impression is positive of your study and the thesis by Noela Mahmutaj, and the theme, the current situation and prospects of Russian-Albanian relations, corresponds to the main requirements set forth by the order of the 1st of September 2016 on the order of awarding academic degrees at Petersburg University, and the degree applicant, Noela Mahmutaj, deserves to be awarded the degree of Candidate of Political Science, Speciality 230004. Article 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated by the author. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria Lvovna. Let's give the floor to Nikolai Alexeyevich now. Nikolai Alexeyevich, I'd like to start by saying that the relationship established during the Cold War period today still agitate the society and prevent the two states from building the mutual beneficial relations, which in the modern world should meet other requirements. So before these states were oriented towards the great states, the world was divided into two parts. Today, each great state or each small country wants the relationship to be equal, and the fact that you have addressed this issue to me seemed very useful and realistic for consideration, and the whole complex of relationship between Russia and Albania. I also liked your vision of how Albania is seen by Russian. For Russian people, Albania is mysterious and difficult to understand. I think this is a good characteristic. I think it is connected with our previous relationship, what happened in 1970s and 1980s, and the challenges the Balkan states ran in 1990s, and so they had certain impact on this relationship. In general, I'd like to compliment your methodological basis, which helped to disclose the topic of the thesis and the dynamics of the Russian-Albanian relationship, which has different weight in the world politics. And here I have to say that this approach was based on mutual interests of Russia and Albania. It seems to have great potential, in my opinion. At the same time, in your work there are some obvious political priorities which exist in the modern Albania, which you have already mentioned in your presentation, pro-American and pro-European trends. And here, the priority of American influence, maybe you said pro-Western influence, but in my opinion, you should divide pro-American and pro-European influences, which are different. And so here, you need to focus on political elite and Albanian society, how dealing with these issues. At the same time, I would like to agree with the difficult relationship. Here, I absolutely agree with you, the political nature and such transformation into the economic and cultural sphere is fully justified. You talk of people's diplomacy, and that's indeed an important factor, which the relationship within the civil society, the educational policy, the relationship between universities, students, professors. In my opinion, so you should strengthen this line, and it has a great potential. I agree with Maria Lvovna regarding this strong part of your work. It's a positive scenario, seems to be most likely, but it was not convincing. You were not convincing enough. And your desire to improve the relationship with Russia and Albania is not enough for this actually to happen. You need other factors are needed here, and here you need to think what is the basis, because so why the treaty has not been signed. Anton was quite right here. Maybe it is because of the expectations of Albania as a Russian relationship with U.S. Grows better. The relationship with Russia and Albania will also grow better. Maybe there is some relation here, but you may have your own opinion on this, of course. As for your achievements, I'd like to mention a complex study of Russian-Albanian interaction in the context of relations between a great state and a small country, and practical steps for political, diplomatic, and other in different spheres. In addition, with numerous advantages, I mentioned some shortcomings of the work, and one of the shortcomings I'd like to mention here, the state is a great power. You characterized with the help of works you have read, mostly written by the American authors, but since your work was written in Russia, so maybe you should pay more attention to the Russian authors, including a very interesting definition of a great power, Shaklina, in the work entitled Russia, the New Competitive Environment, which characterizes a great state from the Russian perspective, and increasing the heuristic nature of the work would also contribute to the appeal. The concept by Pouzan and Wither in their joint work published in 2003. You don't pay attention to the political projects, especially in 1990s, such as the Greater Albania project posed by the Russian Federation, which supported the Orthodox people in the former Yugoslavia. You also do not emphasize on the existing problems between the Orthodox Slavic peoples and Albanians in some state, except for Kosovo, which you describe in paragraph 3.1. And so this relationship, denial of Crimea and a Kosovo parliament about sovereignty, I think you should have focused a little bit more on this and So in my opinion, this is one of the reasons for the relationship between Russia and Albania. And one of the questions, one of the comments I have already given, the political forces in Albania and the development of this issue. I agree with Maria Lvovna. I have the same question. If all the forces are oriented towards the West, how can the relationship between Russia and Albania improve if there was some struggle between ideologies and concepts then? But if there is no such struggle, so then what's the essence? How can we politically improve this relationship? At the same time, I would like to say that despite these critical remarks, in general, I liked the work, and I think that these critical remarks and the positive, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. So I believe your work deserves awarding the degree of candidate of political science, specialty 23004, Article 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated by the author. Thank you. Thank you, Nikolai Alexeyevich. Next, I would like to give the floor to Marina Mikhailovna. Marina Mikhailovna, we cannot hear you. Please turn the microphone on. Can you hear me now? Yes. Thank you very much for giving the floor. Thank you for inviting me to this session of the Dissertation Council at St. Petersburg University. It's my first time, and it's very interesting for me. You've got those new rules of thesis defense. As for the thesis, I heard my review is very similar to that of Maria Lvovna, yet I will focus on the main issues which seem important to me in the thesis and important from the point first of all, if we talk about the positive points, of course, the topic is highly relevant because Albania, in many ways, but Albania is located in the Balkan region, a very important region. The region is important both for Russia, Europe, and the world in general. And finally, the relationship between Russia and Albania from the historical perspective passed through different stages in the relations, and how it will happen in the future. So that is also very important and relevant. And finally, what seems important for me is the question of how the interaction of great powers and small countries should interact. And all the points explain novelty and relevance of the work. As was already mentioned, indeed, its a novelty is quite weakly described, and as complex analysis, interaction between Russia and Albania is too general and too weak definition. The work is logical, and the structure is interaction, conclusion, and 3 chapters. Is very traditional. My main comments apply to chapter. The introduction is too short. It would be interesting to show all the advantages of the work. Is the introduction is too short, on the 10 pages, where it's impossible to review and analyze everything. Also, I have a remark regarding the first chapter, where in the first paragraph especially, it has a great state, and so let me proceed to critical remarks. In the work, you give greater historical overview of relations of Russia and Albania, which is probably good. The author, in the end, in conclusion of her thesis, concludes that the history is the main factor in the relationship between Russia and Albania, and we may agree with that, though in the modern world, which is complex, and so it's changing these relations. Here it's necessary to think the second chapter is dedicated to the interaction between Russia and Albania, and as I read this chapter from the beginning of the thesis, I was slightly puzzled why you talk about the economy, tourism. Where is politics? Where's the political perspective? Then I saw it in chapter 3, and the position of the author is that the economic interests influence and will influence the political interaction. So this is hard for me to agree with this. One may agree, or may also object to this. If you agree with this statement, that the economy and tourism will emerge or promote towards the scenario described by the author as the most optimistic. But honestly speaking, object of political solutions is the stagnation variant is more likely. Let me mention the fact, the advantage of the thesis is the scenario analysis, but the method has not been described. Speaking of Russian works, fairly seldom the scenario analysis is used. So the scenario analysis in the thesis looks very attractive. What else should I mention? Is necessary the method of study. The very fact that the scenario analysis has been given is good. I personally would justify it better. Not only would I identify the most likely scenario, but also the conditions where these or that scenario would be more likely. What are the prerequisites or conditions for this or that scenario to happen? So that will be because It's valuable. So because one cannot but help but ask, why is it so? Next, speaking of disadvantages, drawbacks, as Maria Lvovna, the aim of the thesis is to present the interstate relationship between Russia and Federation Albania as independent actors in international arena and development of the modern political system. Page 7. So here I got several questions. My first question is, both states by definition are actors of the international relations. I don't know a single work their state was denied the status of an actor. So here we're talking about Russia, which is a member of UN and acting at the international arena. Second, the author never describes the actor potential of these states. If we talk about the actor status, so should explain the actions that you describe, the actions and interactions. They are not indicators of the actor status. So right now I'm speaking at so this in action, yes, but I'm not an actor at the moment. So what makes this actor status? I think that is absolutely artificial. This issue of the actor status, and also in the thesis you described difficulties that hinder the relations, but in the work itself you focus not so much on the challenges, but you have given a number of positive examples. The second comment is similar to what has already been said by Maria Lvovna. You have listed very different representatives of different schools, of different theories. I mean, what's wrong with this? First, as it seems to me, your work has been written within the framework of the realistic trend. So you should have said that the state of Albania and Russia, and you should have said that, as you mentioned some scientists of the realistic trend. So you have also included some constructivist scenarios. So in the last chapter, where you have proposed some scenarios, you could have described that somehow. And of course, scientists such as Nye, Cohen. So all these things you should have described, and there's no problem with certain degree of eclecticism. Is the work of in applied studies, and your study is an applied one. Such theoretical eclecticism is acceptable. You should have explained where you have used these or that theory. My third point, my third comment. In the first chapter, in the first paragraph of chapter 1, you describe the states, great states and small countries. This perspective in itself is very interesting. You have listed different definitions of a great state, of a small country. For example, you refer to Miller. You say that in the very definition of a small country, such states were defined as pieces of weakness, which does not recognize their potential to exercise power. I'm quoting. I have quoted your work, but honestly speaking, literature on great states and small countries is very vast, and so it would be good instead of listing the definitions of small states, but give your own opinion. The Miller's definition, for someone who doesn't know the context of this quote, raises questions, because pieces of weakness doesn't fit, because it's a failed state, and which is not the case here, of course. So this is inaccurate. This is an inaccuracy. An inaccuracy, for example, on page 17, use the term soft power as an umbrella term, which unites such related terms as public diplomacy, people's diplomacy, humanitarian NGO diplomacy, etc. But in my opinion, this is not accurate, because the concept of soft power what is the concept of soft power, and how the concept is connected with public diplomacy, people's diplomacy. But the key point here is of this concept is attractiveness. As for humanitarian dimensions of the world policy, it's always possible to present it in an attractive way. Moreover, there are many examples where something is promoted via the culture. So here would be necessary to study, investigate the soft power more, and what is the understanding of what is soft power. Otherwise, it's not clear. But in general, I'd like to say that these critical remarks are not crucial, and the thesis by Mahmutaj Noela on the current situation prospects of the Russian-Albanian relations corresponds to the basic requirements set by the order of the 1st of September 2016, number 6821/1, on the order of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. And the degree applicant Mahmutaj Noela deserves to be awarded the degree of Candidate of Political Science, Specialty 230004, and Political Problems of International Relations, Global and Regional Development, and Article 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated. Thank you. Thank you very much, Marina Mikhailovna. Let's give the floor to Anton Ales Biblev. Thank you for giving the floor. My review is 4 pages long, mostly 4 pages of criticism. This review was published, so I will not repeat what I have already said. And since I started, so we don't. So if I did that, we won't be done by 1 o'clock. In my review, I focus on vague definitions of the 2 key concepts, Russia and Albania. This is especially critical. The use of concept of Albania is incorrect. The concept of Albania as a state is incorrect. Then I talk about use of percolate methodological basis in the work. Then I talk about the hypothesis, talk about incorrect presentation of the historical background. The applicant says quite rightly that the historical background has a major role in the present-day relations between the states, this is true regarding the relations between Albania and Russia, but the applicant, especially on page 24, incorrectly has presented this historical background. Here we should define the interstate relations from the relations between representatives of the 2 nations. On page 82, the author says that there is a long history of interaction between the states of Albania and Russia. Indeed, in reality, there is no such history. The relations between states before 1913 and after 1913, these relations until 1945 were very superficial. The applicant never mentions when the diplomatic relations between Russia and Albania were established, or USSR never mentions the date, as if these relations started in 1945. As for the relations between nations, the history is much longer than is not 250 years long, but 400 years long history of contacts between Russians and Albanians. The first contact probably took place in 1560s during the Volga campaign, and certainly these contacts in 1571, 450 years ago, during the campaign of Crimean Khan and his army and 2 battalions, the campaign against Moscow. Khan Gire's army managed to conquer and burn Moscow, and the Albanian soldiers played a major role in this battle. At least 1/3 of these soldiers were Albanians. Russians saw them as the Turks. They did not realize that until 1826 the corps consisted, the Janissary Corps included only soldiers of non-Turkic origin, Albanians. So this historical blunder, I will note to Albanians who most converted to Islam in the end of 17th, beginning of the 18th century. They entered the Ottoman Empire and became heads of the Ottoman Empire. It's interesting that in 1913, when the independent Principality of Albania was recognized as Albania, the Ottoman Empire has not been recognized by the Republic of Turkey. And between 1913 and 1917, head of the government of this dying empire was an Albanian. So this shows which role in managing the empire the Albanian aristocracy played, and what the applicant says on page 24, that there was some unification of Russian-Albania in the fight against the Ottoman Empire is completely incorrect and contradicts history. As for the emergence of independent Albania, in this business and in defining the territory of this state, which roughly corresponds to the territory of today's Republic of Albania. So my question to is what role was played by Russia in establishing the borders of Albania, on which and following which principle this border was set, and how it was changed. So this is my first question. And the chronological framework of this thesis includes the period between 1945 until 1961. At that, the applicant by mistake says that in 1945 USSR was a major ally of Albania. It's major ally of Albania between 1945 with full consent from Moscow until July 1948, the resolution. So was Yugoslavia, and the diplomatic custody was exercised by my father was involved in this process, and USSR became the main ally took over this role in summer of 1948. You have never described that. So my second question is when and how, especially the military cooperation between Russia, USSR, and the People's Republic of Albania occurred between 1948 and 1961, and what was the reason for the break of this relationship? You said that the relationship, the reason was criticism of USSR or CPSU policy. So please tell me, what were the reasons? What were the reasons for breaking this relationship? And your main thesis, the economy and tourism will be able to overcome this stagnation in the relations between the Republic of Albania and the Russian Federation. This is absolutely unfounded, as is obvious from your own work. You have given data, page 76, that the Russian market is a key role for the Albanian economy. And at the same time, you are given data about the structure of trade in 2019. So the structure in 2019, that the relation between the Russian import to Russia was mostly oil products, and the Russian import from Albania, the relation was 35:1, and the volume of Albanian import was only $5 million, which is very small. And finally, on page 83, you hope that the relationship will become better, and you say that there is a theoretical possibility for improvement of this relationship, but your hypothesis is absolutely different. Your hypothesis says that the complex analysis proves that the relationship will become worse inevitably. So your hypothesis was wrong, but you have not made the necessary conclusion. So I would like to make this conclusion in your speech. I have a negative opinion about your thesis. I think it should be rewritten. There's a number of mistakes. It contains a number of mistakes, which I will not list now, but the list of these mistakes is quite long. One of the mistakes is a statement that neither the Russian Federation nor the Republic of Albania do not participate in military political blocs, and which is wrong. So I will not list your mistakes further. Thank you for the detailed overview and review of the thesis, and I shall present my review now, because most of the critical remarks have already been given. My task is very simple. I would also say that the thesis is very interesting because it touches upon new aspects. We have very few works dedicated to the interaction of Russia and Albania, and this is fairly strange. The very desire to evaluate the prospects of relationship should be supported. It's also interesting that the author reviews this issue, the context of relationship in a great state and a small country, and the impact, considering various impacts of the modern world. And here the work is based on various modern sources, such as the foreign policy concepts, statistics, population surveys. The author demonstrates knowledge of history, relationship between Russia and Albania, and demonstrates that these works have very few conclusions made by the author. They agree with the tasks set and with the aim of the study. So the author concludes that Russia fully complies with the great state concept. The author assesses the evolution of humanitarian and economic relations. Both spheres developed, and today we're talking about emerging foundation for cooperation, which is not yet profound. The applicant gives an interesting answer to prospect of development. If we have any prospects, she considers various scenarios, talks about the possibility of implementation of positive scenario in the interstate relationship, and considering the EU and NATO factors. So the author thus answers questions asked during the discussion that prospect, if there are any prospects. So the author says herself says in the short-term perspective they are hard to achieve. So we shouldn't expect them in that short-term perspective. The answers were given, but the author, the thesis certainly has a number of drawbacks. Many critical remarks have already been voiced, so I shall not repeat what was said by my colleagues. The key point here is that in the theoreticians of different schools were all put in mentioned together. Information, the journalists, mass media should not be seen as sources of information. The editors are not often not responsible and do not correspond to reality. So here is maybe in this context, mass media should not be considered as source of reliable information, and also it's necessary to use universal approach to analysis of foreign policy of Russia and Albania. So this point should also be considered when considering the interstate interaction. It will be interesting to focus on analysis of Kosovo and Crimea, which would make even the work even more beneficial. So this approach and scenarios that you have suggested would eliminate many of the critical remarks. And of course, these critical remarks are only points for discussion because we're talking about political processes in the changing modern world. So there's no single opinion, so you have the right for your own opinion, though it's important to justify your opinion with solid theoretical foundation and in your presentation as well. But in general, my conclusion is that the work corresponds to the requirements because as an independent study, complete study, corresponds to the requirements to such works on political issues in this specialty, and corresponds to the requirements set by the order of the 1st of September 2016, 6821/1, on awarding academic degrees, and the applicant deserves to be awarded degree of candidate of political science, specialty 23004, political problems of international relations, global and regional development. Article 11 has not been violated by the author. Thank you. Now we will give the floor to you to answer all the critical remarks that you have heard, and since many critical remarks were similar, you can answer in any order you prefer, or if you think you may answer several questions together. Thank you. I am very grateful to Maria Lvovna for valuable. I will certainly take them into account in my future work. And as for some comments, I'd like to say the following. As for the list of, indeed, my definition is bad. As for the theoretical approach, I have it on page 6 and 7, and here I may quote: the relations with Russia and Albania are investigated in all spheres of interaction with the use of systematic and interdisciplinary approach. The work indicates methods of research and comparative political method. As for on page 18, if we talk about the relationship of great powers with small states, it's important to note that this relationship is built on the interests of the countries. The idea of interest is at the heart of politics. Basically, the interaction between states is based on shared interests, which is well reflected in the theory of realism. Thus, great powers with small states and vice versa have common interests that can be economic, geopolitical, ideological, etc. Next, as for the political perspective, let me repeat myself. The main spheres that develop in are economy, energy, tourism, and the humanitarian sphere. Each sphere has different projects between countries, but unfortunately some of them exist only on paper. Only the humanitarian sphere is really active, where there are joint projects that are well developing at the present stage. For example, the joint project of film Girocastra. As for the political sphere, we may talk about any prospects only if the Treaty on Friendship and Cooperation is ratified. Its signing and entry into force can solve many issues that are still unanswered. It will become an engine for development and strengthening of trust between Moscow and Tirana, not only in the political sphere, but also in other aspects. As for the scenarios, After studying the three scenarios, negative, stagnation, and positive, I came to the conclusion that the positive scenario is more likely. Because, first, the deterioration of relations between the countries would manifest itself in a lack of willingness to cooperate and partner. Second, there would be a cessation of negations and contacts that would manifest itself in the key areas such as the economy, trade, tourism, education, etc. And finally, the relations between the states are not stagnating, as the main spheres, albeit slowly, are developing in recent years, especially trade, tourism, and humanitarian spheres. Thus, it's in the interests of these countries to develop relations, as the Russian market plays an important role in the Albanian economy, and Albania plays an important strategic role in the Balkans, and for Russia, this region has major historical, cultural, and religious significance. And about the sources and fiction, this official websites of various agencies studied various materials and speeches of officials. Fiction was studied to analyze the humanitarian sphere as one of the main areas and used on pages 59 and 63. These are my answers. Thank you. Let me continue. I'm very grateful to Nikolai Alexeyevich for his valuable remarks, which I shall take into account in my future work, and the studies which Nikolai Alexeyevich recommends I will pay attention to. Regard to other remarks, let me say the following. I agree that the study doesn't pay enough attention to certain political concepts, such as the Great Albania project. It's my understanding that, revived by the nationalist project, has quickly lost its place to the aspiration to join EU and NATO. Our study, I have noted that Albanian authorities use the so-called Albanian Factor in the Balkan politics, which has had a negative impact on relations with Moscow up to now. Let me underline that we shouldn't put an equal sign between Albanian Factor in Tirana's foreign policy and the Great Albania project. It should also be said that if the Great Albania project were to be implemented, there would be a border revision in the Balkans, which would make it difficult to obtain NATO membership and to make EU membership impossible for years to come. EU and NATO membership is more important than border revisions. The Albanian Factor refers to the position of the Albanian minorities in the neighboring countries. At the moment, no major political party in Albania in its slogan puts forward the idea of Great Albania. As for the political sector of Albania, after the fall of the communist regime, the main political forces have been the pro-Western position and seek EU integration. This is also described on page 79, although there's still some political instability which is connected with the internal challenges, electoral reform. The overall goal of political parties is to meet the requirements and meet the EU criteria. So this is all. Thank you. Next. I'm very grateful to Professor Marina Mikhailovna for her critical remarks and comments that I will take into account in my future work. Of course, I will use the studies recommended by Marina Mikhailovna. As for some remarks, I'd like to say the following. As for the list of studies of different theoretical direction, in my thesis, I have listed works of those authors I have read in order to understand and analyze the relations of states at the present state. I studied different works, eventually choosing the concept of Ney's soft power as a more suitable one for describing the modern relations between Moscow and Tirana. Concerning the greater power and the small state, there is an example, the works of Miller, Small State is a Piece of Weakness, to find out what difficulties the small states face in solving various problems, and also in what cases they have no voice in certain issues or are even limited by the attitude of other countries because they are in the sphere of fulfilling the tasks of another great power. For example, at present, Albania meets the EU criteria. And now I'd like to thank you for your remarks. Professor Bebler, I am very grateful to Professor Bebler for his valuable comments and suggestions that I will take into account in my future work. As for some comments, let me say the following. I'll give you my considerations. First, my work is written in Specialty 230004, which is Political Problems of the International Relations, Global and Regional Development, and not in 070015, History of International Relations and Foreign Policy. That is why, in accordance with the requirements of Specialty 3004, Political Problems of International Relations, Global and Regional Development, my work deals mainly with issues of modern international relations, dismantling the communist regime in Albania to the present time. At the same time, we proceed from the fact that the relations between Russia and Albania are different from the relations between the USSR and People's Albania, because in both cases there was a change of the political order which led to qualitative changes in the foreign policy of both countries. In the relations between the USSR and People's Albania, a huge role was played by the relations between CPSU, Albanian Labour Party, an ideological factor that is practically absent in the relations between Russia and Albania at the present stage. At present, there are 2 points of view on the relation between Russia and Albania. The first opinion is that esteemed Professor Bebler, is that the relations between Russia and Albania could be good if both states were in good relations with the West at the same time. The second point of view is that the small countries in Europe can play a connecting role for relations between Russia and the West. This was also mentioned by Foreign Minister Lavrov during his visit to Norway. In the opinion of my dear professor and academic advisor, Konstantin Konstantinovich Kudulay, Balkan states, although small in size, can also play a positive role in establishing relations. I have great respect for Professor Bebler, but I support the opinion of Professor Konstantin Konstantinovich Kudulay regarding postponement of ratification of the Treaty on Friendship and Cooperation. Albania has not stated that it refuses to ratify it. It's still in the status of project because it requires revision on both sides. The states are probably not ready for it, especially Albania. In our case, Albania during the democracy era, after the collapse of the communist regime to the present, has been and is in an unstable political situation, which is the reason for the ineffective cooperation with both the Balkan states and partners other states. The possibility of meeting between Minister Lavrov and Prime Minister of Albania, Rama, the end of year 2020 in Tirana is currently under discussion, where the future status of the treaty and the development of cooperation between the states in various areas will be discussed. With regard to the economic relations and tourism, I have analyzed in detail the statistics created on the basis of the Russian customs data on trade and the Institute of Statistics of Albania on tourism. I have great respect for Professor Bebler, but I believe that the economy and tourism can overcome this stagnation in the interstate relations. Having studied the situation in Albania and Russia, as well as data from the official state web pages, I conclude that a negative scenario is unlikely. Of course, the political decisions largely determine the economic and other types of cooperation, but at the same time, the economic interests have always influenced and will influence the political cooperation. This I have described on page 77. Therefore, the trade and economic relations and contacts in the sphere of culture, education, and science will become a strong stimulus for the development of relations between the peoples, plus institutional structures in Albania and Russia. Issues related to settlement of the Soviet debt in Albania I have discussed on page 38. In my opinion, religion is one of the issues that do not hinder the development of relations between the countries, because the level of popularity of religion in Albania is quite low. Albania is a tolerant country, despite the fact that many consider it to be Muslim. However, the academic paper looks at Kosovo, pages 70-73, as one of the important issues in relations of Russia and Albania, and I believe that resolution of the issue between Pristina and Belgrade will lead to important steps towards cooperation, not only between Russia and Albania, but also between the other Balkan states. I accept the remark that the name Albania is not quite correct in relation to the administrative units of the Ottoman Empire, with the populated Albanians in the 18th and 19th centuries. But in Russia, if you look at Brief History of Albania, edited and Albanian, Christoph Pasheri and Miranda Whisker, Albania from Anarchy to Balkan Identity, the term Albania even is used even in early antiquity and early Middle Ages. Moreover, the work does not even indirectly reflect the archaic idea of Great Albania, not the term itself is used. As for the theoretical part, the first chapter, the role of great powers and small states in the modern world, is devoted. I have listed names of different researchers in the theoretical part in order to understand which concept is most suitable for the modern Russian-Albanian relations. When analyzing cooperation in this humanitarian sphere, I used the soft power concept by Nye, and I concluded this is the most appropriate for the modern relations between Moscow and Tirana. The last chapter of my thesis is devoted to scenarios of the Russian-Albanian relations, and it presents the Albanian perspective on Russia's role in the Balkans, which is not often found in Russian studies on international relations and world politics. That's all. I thank. There's 1 second. I'm very grateful to Natalia Valerievna for her valuable comments, which I will certainly take into account in my future work. With regard to the comments, let me say the following. Regarding the theoretical part, let me say again that I look at different. Please, we understand your position. So our comments were the same, so the answer is similar. So should I continue? Yes. Since you have already answered this question, you don't need to answer it again. Okay, thank you. Then the next comment is regarding the recognition of Kosovo and the status of Crimea. I believe that the review and comparison of Kosovo and Crimean events is indeed of great scientific interest. However, conducting such a study would require a significant number of factors: historical, ethno-religious, political, legal, etc. And it's not possible to carry out such a study in the framework of one thesis. So it's also important the official Tirana follows the EU policy, that it really reacts to Crimea's accession. I don't consider the issue of Crimea as an obstacle for development of relations between Moscow and Tirana, as it does not directly concern these relations. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Noela. Dear colleagues, dear friends, are you satisfied with Noela's answers? Thank you. Let's continue. Do the attendees have any questions to Noela? No. Then, have we received any questions during the email, during our discussion? Then let's give the floor to the academic advisor. Dear Konstantin Konstantinovich, please turn the microphone on and tell us about the degree applicant, which provisions, do share all the provisions, and which of them deserve special attention. Dear colleagues, dear members of the Council, I presented my review of Noela's thesis. You can hear me, yes? Yes. I submitted my review where I expressed my opinion. In my opinion, the work has definite novelty as a research paper because these issues have not been properly investigated in Russian or international research literature. So from that point, the work deserves high evaluation. The author has studied vast material. Of course, I think it's just to yet of the positive points. So my opinion is positive. I think the work corresponds to the requirements applied to candidates' thesis in this specialty. I will allow myself to say a few words regarding the discussion, which I think should be emphasized. First, the treaty. Definitely, the Treaty on Friendship and Cooperation is important, but to connect it with external factors, I think, is not justified. We have many cases in history where important treaties disappeared because of internal political problems. Think of history, remote history. 1926, Soviet Union and Romania signed a treaty on non-aggression. In 1931, all parties voted for ratification of prolongation of this treaty, which never occurred for several years because in Germany they never had the time to ratify. In 1939, negotiation of August 1939 started, and both foreign ministers, Ribbentrop and Molotov, may refer to this treaty. So when, for political reasons, treaty is not signed, this is unfortunately maybe this situation is not uncommon. So I think in this case the main reason for the delay is the question. Another question, so the content of the treaty was drafted in 1995, 2004. Of course, the content of the treaty is maybe not relevant anymore and should be ratified. Some articles should be amended, of the treaty should be amended. Could Albania in the future play a role in improving the relations with the West? My opinion is that this will the Cold War period will last for some years, and in my opinion, the probability is quite likely. Russia is trying to start dialogue, so maybe other countries is the chairman of OBSE and use this opportunity, though the relations at this stage between Russia and Albania is inefficient. All states, yet there is some potential for improvement as issue. Albania repeats decisions of European Union, but has never initiated the worsening of this relation by itself, neither because of Crimea nor because of other more complex issue is the situation in Albanian society. I regret that the author has described this point vaguely. There's no hostility. Yes, the society is oriented towards European Union, but let me give some examples. 2003, right after the crisis of 1990, Tirana, game of football, Albania won the game. Prime Minister of Albania made an address. A small Albania defeated a superpower, but football fans, some of them welcomed in Russian team in Russia. Over the last 15 or 18 years, the number of Russian speakers in Albania has decreased. This is an indicator that there's no hostility of any kind. The main problem here is Kosovo. This is a most sensitive issue between Tirana and Pristina, and of course it affects the relations with Russia, because Russia supports Serbia, traditional strategic partner in the region. But I don't see problems that Kosovo, the problem of Kosovo will be settled eventually, but this issue will worsen our relationship. The second point that was not mentioned, which I think should be mentioned, is how fiction in People's Albania, no social studies have been conducted, so we know that. A very limited number of studies has been conducted in recent years, in the past 15 years. So that is why the only valuable sources of information will be Poland, Slovenia, where which had strong schools of social studies. So that is why the author has to use various sources, including fiction. I think the degree applicant should have said that, maybe in a little bit more detail, but in general, I think my opinion of the thesis is positive. Thank you. Thank you, Konstantin Konstantinovich. Dear friends, since our session is held, some members of the Council are present in remote access mode. Do you have any questions or maybe any points? So everything is okay. Then, so we have an opportunity to take a technical break to discuss the results. The sound shall be switched off, and as I will ask to stop broadcasting, and I will ask everyone who's not a member of the Dissertation Council to leave the council room. So let us discuss the work and the presentation. Thank you.
Соответственно, перерыв где-то не более 5 минут у нас объявляется.
The break will take no more than 5 minutes.
Тоже тогда вы на перерыв уходите.
Dear colleagues, please turn the sound on and make sure we are on air. The most crucial moment of our session is coming. Can we all see and hear each other? If Konstantin Konstantinovich wants to join us, please invite him. We can all see and hear each other. I put the question of awarding to Mahmutaj Noela the degree of candidate of political science, Specialty 2300, political problems of international relations, global and regional development, to the open individual vote. Let me remind you that a decision of the Dissertation Council in awarding a scientific degree shall be considered positive if at least half, but not no less than 3 members of the Dissertation Council voted for it, according to Article 23 of the order. So let me call your name. Lagutina Maria Lvovna, your opinion? I support awarding. Council Member Baranov Nikolai Alexeyevich, I think that Mahmutaj Noela deserves to be awarded the degree of candidate of political science. Thank you. Council Member Lebedeva Marina Mikhailovna, your opinion? My opinion is to support the thesis by Mahmutaj Noela. Council Anton Alice Bebler, your opinion? My opinion is negative. Thank you very much. And I, Chairman of the Council, Yeremina Darvina, would like to support this thesis. That is why, as a result, 4 voted for, 1 voted against, and no one abstained. That is why the decision to award to Mahmutaj Noela the degree of candidate of political specialty in 2300 political problems of international relations, global and regional development has been made. Dear colleagues, since our session, as some members are working in the remote access mode, do council members or the applicant and others present have any questions, comments on the procedure of the session? No questions. Let us greet the applicant and let us give the floor to the applicant for her closing remarks. Thank you. Thank you, dear council members, for devoting your time and in-depth consideration of my thesis. Your valuable comments and recommendations will be taken into account in my future work. Thank you very much. I would like to thank my academic advisor, Konstantin Konstantinovich Kudulay, for constant assistance and understanding for writing my thesis. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good chance to all of you. Thank you. I declare the session closed. Thank you for your participation.